find myself at odds with clergymen, but I encountered one at an orphanage tonight who gave me pause. Despite my consuming most of his young parishioners, the father did not react in anger. He told me there was hope, that if I would repent, eternal paradise could still be mine. I explained that to an immortal such as myself, the afterlife is of little value, for one must perish to reach it, and I cannot. Sadly, the father will also be delayed in his journey, for I must confess that I converted him to a new religion that night, and as his new lord, I will demand a longer term of service than was required by his previous employer. I have just returned from a lovely respite at the home of a local governor. He was a man of considerable means, and he offered to deliver 10 victims in trade for each day I allowed him and his family to live. I enjoyed his hospitality for nearly a fortnight before he became unable to keep his end of the bargain, his delivery being short by 3 people. Well, I am not unreasonable. I took his wife and 2 daughters to make up the difference, and allowed him another full day of life to enjoy the fruits of his clever bargaining. There is nothing I enjoy more than strolling down a crowded street on a warm night. All around me, people rushing and loitering, scheming and loving, bearing their souls and lying through their teeth. I hear the pounding hearts, the coursing veins. I see flushed cheeks and bared necks. The street is my garden, and the fruit is in season. Some ripe and tender, others tough and withered, but all bursting with the red nectar of life that begs to be released. Ah, what joy to exist as a creature of solitary desire and be surrounded by endless supply. This evening I was privileged to make the acquaintance of Adrien Lamond, one of Paris's most prominent chefs. He made me an exquisite meal. Upon arriving in New Marais, I met a kindly innkeeper who showed me special attention. His wife had died 13 years prior in childbirth, and she left him with an inn to manage and twin baby girls to raise. Oh, those girls were his very heart. He would watch them proudly as they walked among the tables serving food and drink. Oh, they were beautiful in appearance and sweet in manner, having blossomed into young women at an early age. Their beauty was striking, but their similarity even more so. Patrons would often stop and stare as they walked past. By any measure of observation, the 2 girls were completely identical. As I recall, they even tasted the same. I have been hunted by many men, but the most persistent was Colonel John Greystoke. The colonel pursued me for months before his efforts finally bore fruit. He had brought his entire family to face me. Over 30 men and boys armed with muskets, stakes, and holy water. I'm afraid their efforts were futile. I converted the youngest of them first, then forced the colonel to watch while his grandchildren tore his sons to pieces. Oh, for the colonel himself, I broke both his arms at the shoulders and left him hanging upside down, secured to an oak tree on the back of his property. Well, there were no large animals living near that region, but it was well known that the Greystoke Manor had frequent trouble with rats. My first attempt to reach the Americas was ineffectual. I knew I would need sustenance for the long journey, so I sought passage on a crowded slave ship that was captained by an arrogant and vulgar slave runner. I avoided his company during the day, and each night I would sneak below decks and draw blood from the wretches chained up in the hold. After less than a week at sea, we were forced to return to port because the fool slaver had murdered half his crew for insubordination. I happily parted company as soon as we docked, but not before I'd finished my work among his cargo. He sailed away with his boat, still full of slaves, but he was no longer their master. Local legend says the slaver's body was found floating in the harbor the next morning, so full of holes and emptied of blood that even the sharks had been unable to detect it. I was especially ravenous this evening, so I decided to forego stealth altogether. I knocked at the door of the first house I came to, and as soon as they allowed me inside, I ravaged them without hesitation. The family was large, both in stature and in number. I consumed the mother, the cook, the gardener, and had just finished the last of the 7 children when the front door burst open. The doorway was filled by a massive man in white clothing that was stained all over with blood. His large, meaty hands were also tinted red, and the right one held a large cleaver. The look of shock on his face was matched by the surprised smile on my own. I had apparently chosen the home of the town's butcher. He screamed in anger before succumbing to my bite, but for a moment I knew he had felt the same thing I had, a surprising sense of kinship. I've been called many things: a monster, a demon, an abomination. Men condemn my feedings as the worst kind of sin, but their judgments are naive and short-sighted. I have watched generations of men rise and fall, their bodies return to dust, and their names quickly forgotten. All their energies wasted on trivialities. Each time I drink, I give a fleeting, meaningless human the chance to contribute to an eternal purpose, the opportunity to be valued by a god.